Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and I heard that you like toast, so let's make some. And of course, if you don't like toast, then well, here's some One Piece instead. Because we are here to discuss the sheer insanity of chapter 1027, the out-of-context summary for which is as follows. Your time starts now. The stakes have now risen from medium to well done, as we have exactly 5 minutes to defeat 2 dinosaurs, 2 emperors, and 1 aubergine. So in order for one to succeed, we will need to bring them down at a pace of roughly 1 per minute. And look, no pressure or anything, but if you fail, then literally everyone dies, including you. That's right, you watching this video. I told you the stakes were high. Although there is one way to protect yourself, which would be by subscribing to the Grand Line Review, resulting in consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. But back to One Piece now. There's a lot of amazing pictures and words on pages in chapter 1027, but I do want to start with Yamato because we have a slight revelation that Roger and Whitebeard were also confirmed sky splitters during their scuffles, which is only a slight revelation because that's one of those things that we probably could have comfortably assumed, but I did always find it very interesting that Oda didn't show us any kind of sky splittage within their flashback confrontation. So our confirmed sky splitters are now Roger, Whitebeard, Shanks, Big Mom, Kaido, and Luffy. It sounds so weird to equate him to those names. This chapter also makes a couple of things very clear. The first of which is that Luffy does intend to beat Kaido one-on-one. And it looks like every other character on Onigashima is pretty much going to do everything possible to ensure that this match happens. Is Luffy really going to do this? Have we actually come this far? I'm honestly still in a bit of a state of disbelief after the sky split last week. If I was on Onigashima, I probably would have been like that Mary guy who fainted. Although going through this chapter, I couldn't help but recall an interview that Oda did for what I believe was the One Piece Great newspaper, or one of them, I think there were several, where he addressed Kaido's strength directly, and the quote is as follows. When Kaido appeared for the first time, I said Luffy can't defeat such a strong character yet, and I'm yet to know how Luffy would defeat Kaido. Probably my audience would not be satisfied if the reason for defeating Kaido is just because Luffy's punch is so strong. Luffy and I have to find a solution, somehow. So that interview occurred around 5 years ago now, and I guess my question to all of the you is, would you be satisfied at this point? Because in many ways you can argue that Luffy has worked, Luffy has evolved, and he has earned this shot at victory. However, in many other ways you can also argue that Oda has just found a way to make Luffy's punches stronger, and he's going to defeat Kaido because his punch is so strong. I'm not quite sure which side I fall on yet. I know there's a lot of fighting left to be done, which is why I don't want to get too deeply into this too preemptively. I'm more just taking stock and kind of realizing that, wow, 5 years ago this seemed so far away, like a dream practically, but that dream is happening right here and right now, and that's taking me some time to come to grips with. What I will say is that as far as this chapter goes, I completely buy it. Every panel featuring the standoff between Luffy and Kaido is pretty much the stuff of legends, and for the first time since Marineford, we may be actually witnessing the fall of an Emperor of the Sea. And we're also witnessing a mighty double chin happening from Luffy here, which is very reminiscent of a certain image drawn earlier on in the Roof Piece saga. But what really sells this as some sort of imminent conclusion would be a particular thought from Yamato, who notices that Onigashima is beginning to crumble and speculates that this is in direct correlation to Kaido's crumbling strength powers. Is this the first time that this has happened? Just to elaborate on what this is, because past Liam just kind of stopped talking at that point, he forgot he was being filmed, but I feel that this is the first time that we have even speculated in regards to putting a ceiling on Kaido's strength. The first time that we've had a proper stress test to show us that there are indeed limitations, and here they are. It only took us 9 vassals, 5 worst generation members, a rebellious spawn, and a bite on the butt from a fellow dragon, but Kaido's strength is finally starting to hit some sort of quantifiable state. And that's what gives me the most confidence in Luffy. I mean, forgetting that One Piece is a story and the purpose is to beat the bad guy to stop the bad things, putting all of that to one side, seeing the limitations of the main antagonist always gives me faith that Luffy will win, because he is the only living character in this series with the sheer willpower to transcend any and all limitations. Essentially, what I'm saying is that if Kaido has a ceiling, then Luffy is going to shatter it, because that's the thing that he does, and that's why he's being consistently sued in civil court for punching people's roofs. He is a menace, a straw-hatted menace. Speaking of ceilings though, we had a fairly clear one placed on Yamato as well, with what looks like a very, I can only describe this as, ow injury, and I suppose that this is just the sort of thing that Kaido can do to people who aren't made of rubber, and it is nice to see some consequences though. A little reminder of what we're dealing with here, and that even someone like Yamato realistically never stood a chance. chance. Now, I don't know if that makes the whole Luffy situation more or less believable, but it does definitely put more pressure on him to deliver. Along with this, Momonosuke's role is also starting to become more clear, because once Kaido has been defeated, or even whilst he's being defeated, all of his little fun dragon clouds are going to vanish, and it is going to be squarely, or whatever the shape of Onigashima is, on the shoulders of Momonosuke to ensure that everyone doesn't die, like literally everyone. Because this chapter took what I thought were already fairly apocalyptic stakes and enhanced the crap out of them. Not only were the people of the Flower Capital going to be crushed to death, but apparently even if Onigashima doesn't fall directly on top of them, it is still going to set off an explosion big enough to kill everyone and everything. Alright, okay, I mean, I feel like we had sufficient stakes already, but sure, this works as well. Also, is it at all weird that we're talking about dropping an explosive on an island based on Japan? I'm getting some very World War II sorts of feels here. So what we're effectively building here is our grand sink or swim moment for Momonosuke, because this isn't just about taking down Kaido anymore. Up until this point, Luffy could have beaten him, Onigashima could have fallen, but so long as it wasn't above the Flower Capital, all would have been well. However, that is no longer the case at all. Which I really like, because in the end, this whole mega arc, in fact this whole samurai saga that we've been watching, is much more about fulfilling the Kozuki legacy than it is about two pirates hitting each other. And it feels like a very perfect role for Momonosuke. He is gradually gaining confidence, learning new things about himself, and even making sacrifices for the people of Wano. We are watching him in real yet fictional time build his CV to apply for the Shogun of Wano position, which is important because he does need to prove himself in that regard. I mean, I'm sure that the people of Wano would gladly accept another Kozuki without having really done anything, so long as it's not a Kurozumi, I guess. But that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, especially when we think back to Zou, because Luffy's conditions for joining this endeavor were let's team up, it's an alliance. And then he promised to take down Kaido. But we're also watching Momo make good on his part of this alliance. It is his job to save Wano, whilst Luffy takes down the big bad Oni man. This is actually starting to give me Fishman Island vibes. Watching a helpless crying child ascend to the role of island savior, I can't help but think of Shirahoshi. In fact, this whole situation is very similar to the Fishman Island climax, when the Noah was threatening to destroy the nation from above. But in that moment, Shirahoshi grew the F up and was well and truly prepared to sacrifice herself to save her country. So Momo was in a similar position, just minus the ability to call on all of the funky Sea Kings. But that's okay, because he himself is basically a Sky King. What I'm still anxiously awaiting is a factor that we failed to identify ever since it was introduced on Punk Hazard, being why Vegapunk considered Momonosuke's fruit a failure. Because there's a slight question in this chapter as to whether or not Momo can actually replicate Kaido's abilities, but it may also be one of those clever, dramatically relevant situations where whatever the fault with the fruit is actually Momo's key to success. Like if he can produce a different type of cloud or something, maybe one that's permanent or just something different from Kaido's model. Also, fun thing to note about Momonosuke, he did not faint during the Clash of Conquerors haki that split the sky, unlike the merry guy who was broadcasting the event. And you would think that, let's be honest, given how relatively weak-willed Momo currently is, then that would have been a solid possibility. And once again, I'll pull out the old "it's a story" card, because that does need to be played. Momonosuke needs to be conscious for the events to continue, but it's still a pretty big thing to consider in context. Momo was so close to this clash and he is still up and running. So that represents some pretty serious willpower, and good on him for having it. One thing I don't think I've mentioned yet, however, is that we now have an updated time frame. 5 minutes? Yeah, alright, sure. This is going to be the longest 5 minutes of our lives. 5 minutes is notably not very long, and there's a lot to be done in that time. But from Fishman Island vibes, we move straight to Dressrosa now. Wano is giving me a very Birdcage kind of feel. You know, when Luffy told Guts that he needed 10 minutes of stalling, well, that was an incredibly long 10 minutes. And now we're dealing with half that time, but with like 100 times more to do. Although I should say that 5 minute time limit isn't something set in stone, because I suppose that ideally by that stage, Momo will have done whatever Momo needs to do, and be in a position to use his funky dragon powers to stall that little bit longer. Still though, Wano is seemingly racing to a conclusion, and it just feels so soon to have a 5 minute clock brought up when we still have ever so much left to wrap up. And one of these threads makes up quite a big part of this chapter actually, which is Zoro versus King. And I have to say, this is easily my favorite King related chapter so far. However, that's not a very high standard, because he's been a very quiet member of the Onigashima Onigashima party. He doesn't do or say much. However, he made an incredible impact this week. You know, I think King has said more words in this one chapter than the rest of the entire Wano arc. We don't get a particularly good look at it, but King's hybrid form borders on just plain terrifying. He's like a sort of SCP Slenderman style silhouette. You know, that sort of thing you'd see in the distance of a blurry photo and just go, what in the crap is that? Before promptly deciding that no, you don't want to know. And for the first time since he was introduced, King managed to give me a legitimately threatening aura. Watching him seemingly casually toss Zoro around, even if he is still heavily injured, is really giving King that tasty clout he needs considering his second in command position. Plus this one panel, my favorite of the entire chapter by far. This panel is everything. King here looks utterly unstoppable, like a Terminator who will chase you to the ends of the earth. It's almost demonic in nature. In fact, he's out demoning Demon Robin here for sure. But I suppose the big thing to come out of this clash is the promise of learning a bit more about the man behind the mask. Aha, it's coming off. Mask theory wins again. Mask theory is a thing that I made up and might officially exist under some sort of other name, but it's the idea that if a prominent character is wearing a mask, then it's because they have something to hide, which means that there will come a time in a story when that mask is taken away for dramatic something something. And recently Yamato was a great example of mask theory in action, although my favorite instance in One Piece will always be Duval, because that was mask theory being used for pure comedy. You know, I dare say we're about to see what a Lunarian looks like. Well, maybe not about to, but eventually, and I honestly have no idea what to expect from this whatsoever. Lunarians might just look like regular people with wings and fire powers. You know, it could just be Ace with wings, which I guess is what Ace is now, currently. But Lunarians might have a distinctive face that King elects to hide, or maybe King's face is covered in scars, or maybe, just maybe, King is a very self-conscious, precious, little special man that doesn't like people looking at him. Also, I want to mention the cover page. It's not quite the dramatic assault on my heart that last week was, but I think it's always worthwhile lingering on Roger, because even though we did have a whole flashback featuring him, we really do not see a lot of the former Pirate King, especially in such a casual, mischief-making Luffy-style situation. Really, this image is almost Luffy cosplaying Roger. That's just how similar these two are starting to become, and I would not be at all surprised if by the end of the series, Luffy is looking even more similar. All he really needs is a sword and a mustache, and look, we're kind of there. And just a bit of a Japanese thing now, Roger has graffitied the lion by writing the word Inu on its arm. What does it say? Nui? No, it's Inu. Oh, right. Why? Inu just means dog, which is a stupid sort of joke. The fact that Roger has written the word dog on a cat, it's one of the most childish things he could have possibly done, and I love it. I also love toast. And you love One Piece videos, so here is another, because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.